When I first stepped into that little clearing, I wasn't expecting to see anyone. Not here, not this far out in the woods. I'd been walking the old service trail, checking the dry brush, because the fire warnings had been off the charts for a week. It was one of those afternoons where the heat sits heavy on your shoulders, like the whole forest is holding its breath. That's when I saw it. A shape. Still. Too still. At first, I thought it was a coyote lying low, waiting. But as I got closer, my chest tightened. It was a dog, a big shepherd mix, by the look of him, but so thin it made my stomach turn. His fur was patchy, burned in places, like he'd been too close to something that didn't forgive. His ribs pushed against his skin like someone had drawn them in with chalk. And yet, he wasn't moving. He was sitting upright, perfectly still, like a statue carved out of bone and grief. That's when I saw the grave. It wasn't fancy, just a simple wooden cross, stuck in the earth at the edge of the clearing. No flowers, no stones, just a name burned into the wood. I couldn't read it from where I stood, but I didn't need to. The way that dog stared at it, eyes locked, like the rest of the world had gone quiet. There was no doubt. Whoever lay under that dirt was his person. I swallowed hard. I've seen loyal dogs before. I've had one myself. But there was something about this, something that made my breath catch like a fishhook in my throat. "Hey, boy," I said softly, taking a cautious step forward. "It's okay. You're okay." Nothing, not even an ear twitch. I crouched a little, hands out so he could see I meant no harm. My boots crunched on the dry earth, and still, no reaction. His eyes didn't leave the cross, not for a second. It was like I wasn't even there. "Come on, buddy," I tried again, softer this time. "You can't stay here forever." The words tasted wrong the second they left my mouth, because deep down, I knew that's exactly what he intended to do. That was when I noticed the marks in the dirt. Paw prints, dozens of them, worn into the ground like little moons. Some fresh, some older. He'd been pacing before he decided to stop. My throat tightened as it hit me. This wasn't a dog who wandered by. He'd been here for days, maybe longer. I looked around for signs of food, water, anything. There was nothing but the forest and the silence. And then, for just a moment, I thought I saw him blink. Not at me, at the grave, like he was trying to stay awake, trying to hold on to something only he could feel. "Jesus," I muttered under my breath. I should have left then, called someone, animal control, a rescue, anyone. But I didn't move. I just stood there like an idiot, watching a dog who had chosen death over leaving his master's side, and then a dry wind slid between the trees, lifting the edges of my shirt. It carried a smell I knew too well, faint, almost nothing, but there, smoke. I turned my head toward the horizon. The tree line looked the same, green and endless, but the air, it had that weight to it, that whisper that makes the back of your neck crawl. I looked back at him. Nothing had changed. Not his posture, not his stare. The world could have ended around him, and I don't think he'd have noticed. I don't know how long I stood there, torn between leaving and staying, doing something or doing nothing. But the heat was climbing, and that smell was getting stronger. I took another step toward him, slow, careful. "Hey," I said softly, my voice almost breaking. "Come with me, please." And for the first time, he moved, just barely. His head turned, no more than an inch, until his eyes found mine. What I saw there, I'll never forget it. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anger. It was something deeper, something I don't have words for, like he was saying, "You don't understand, I can't go." And then he turned back to the grave. Just like that. I felt something twist in my gut so hard I almost doubled over, because I realized I wasn't looking at a dog anymore. I was looking at a promise. And I thought the strangest thing was just how loyal he was. But I had no idea what was coming. The wind shifted again, and the smell of smoke slipped through the birches like a secret nobody wanted to tell. It scratched the back of my throat, dry and metallic, a warning older than any language. I looked up. The sky was still summer blue, but somewhere beyond the ridge a thin brown smear drifted west to east, almost invisible if you didn't know what to look for. I listened, really listened, and there it was, a soft, crackling hiss, faint as a match striking in another room. The dog's ears twitched. For the first time since I'd seen him, something broke that stone-still posture. His head lifted half an inch, nose angling into the wind, drawing in the same truth I'd just tasted. "Fire," I whispered, though I don't know whether I meant it for him or myself. He didn't bolt, he didn't even stand. Instead, he lowered his body, pressing his chest to the dirt as if to shield the ground itself. His paws stretched forward until the pads touched the foot of the grave. Then he laid his head on the dry earth, eyes never leaving the cross, like a soldier taking position over something sacred. My heart thudded. "Buddy, you can't stay here. The whole ridge could go up." I took a step, then another, hands outstretched. Three things happened almost at once. First, a gust ripped through the clearing, rattling dead leaves so loudly it sounded like distant applause. Second, a fresh line of smoke curled above the treetops, darker, thicker, hungry. Third, the dog growled, not the warning snarl you hear before a bite, but a low, sorrowful hum, as if he were pleading with the earth itself to calm down. I froze. For one heartbeat, fear punched me in the gut. But the growl didn't rise. It wavered, broke, and slipped into a whine so soft I barely caught it. He wasn't threatening me. He was begging me to understand. The ground felt hotter under my boots. A crow burst out of the canopy, squawking toward the river, and I realized every living thing with sense was already leaving. Every living thing but this one. I crouched beside him. Up close I could see where the flame had kissed him days ago. Singed fur, pink skin, tiny blisters. "How long, boy?" I muttered. "How long have you kept watch?" He blinked slowly, and in that blink I felt the answer. Long enough for hope to quit, but not loyalty. A shiver ran through me worse than any chill, because I knew I was staring at something pure, something that didn't bargain with danger the way people do. Another crackle, louder now, like a far-off campfire multiplied by 1,000. Orange light flickered between trunks on the northern slope. My pulse started to hammer. I reached for his collar. There wasn't one. Nothing to grab, nothing to pull. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "If we go now, we can both make it. I'll come back for the grave when it's safe, I swear it." He didn't move. He didn't even breathe for a moment. Then, as if answering a command older than both of us, he pressed his nose to the wooden cross and closed his eyes. It was a kiss, tender, final, unashamed. My throat burned. I couldn't tell if it was the smoke or the sight of that single perfect gesture. I glanced up slope. Embers were leaping, riding wind like fireflies out of hell. We had minutes, maybe. I wanted to scream, to haul him up no matter what, but my hands wouldn't obey. There was something sacred here, something I had no right to break. "Okay," I whispered, voice shaking. "Okay, but at least let me—" A crack echoed like a rifle. A dead pine snapped in two, flames licking its spine. Sparks spun into the sky. My survival instinct roared awake. I backed off, heart thundering, unable to tear my gaze from him. He didn't flinch. Not once. The fire's reflection danced in his eyes, yet he stared as calmly as if watching sunrise. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe the wind would shift, the flames would die, the danger would pass, that nature would spare this tiny island of grief just because it was so pure. I thought the fire might show mercy, but I had no idea what kind of trial was about to begin. The wind swung southeast and slammed a sheet of heat against my face. Smoke rolled in behind it, thick, gray, choking, turning the birches into ghosts. In the space of a breath, the graveyard went from quiet clearing to furnace throat, every shadow trembling orange. I didn't think. I just ran. "Come on, boy," I coughed, dropping to my knees beside him. My eyes stung so badly I could barely see, but the dog was still there, same posture, same impossible focus. Flames cracked somewhere upwind. Hot needles of ash drifted down and sizzled on the dry grass. I wrapped my arms under his chest, fingers sliding on slick ribs, and tried to lift. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight anchored by something deeper than muscle. He twisted, not to bite, but to plant his paws harder into the dirt. A rumble vibrated through his chest, low and weary, the sound a boulder might make if you begged it to roll aside. "It's burning. Do you understand?" I gasped, hoisting again. My forearms brushed the raw patches on his flank. He winced, but never snapped. The growl rose, then broke into a broken glass whimper that cut straight through the roar of the fire. And then, he did something that stopped me cold. He lowered himself, slow as dusk, until his nose touched the wooden cross. With a soft, shuddering sigh, he laid his head against the grain, as gentle as a lullaby, like a child curling into a mother's lap. My grip faltered. "No," I breathed. I wasn't sure if it was a plea or a prayer. Another gust roared through the treetops, showering sparks that skittered across the dry ground. A flame licked the base of a fallen branch only 20 paces away and burst into frantic light. The graveyard was becoming a circle in a tightening noose. Panic finally drowned the reverence. I hooked my arms around his torso, braced my boots, and hauled with everything I had. He scrabbled, awkward, claws digging trenches in the soil. Not at me, never at me, but at the thought of leaving. His body twisted, eyes wide with something like apology, and the sound that broke from his throat was the purest grief I have ever heard. "Please," I shouted, voice cracking. "I'll come back. I swear I'll come back for him." Whether he believed me, I'll never know. His legs suddenly went slack. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd yielded. Relief surged, raw, grateful, almost dizzying. I staggered back, dragging him half a step, only half a step, before his muscles coiled again like steel cables. He anchored himself, ribs rattling, and pressed his cheek to the cross one last time. Not defiance. Farewell. An ember landed on my sleeve, burned straight through the fabric. I slapped it out, blinking through tears that might have been smoke, might have been shame. That was when the reality hit me. If I kept wrestling him, we'd both die here, and the grave he guarded would vanish under a tide of flame none of us could stop. I needed help, gear, blankets, maybe a tranquilizer, anything stronger than my bare hands and breaking heart. "I'll be back," I rasped. It felt like lying even as I said it. He didn't lift his head. He only closed his eyes, one slow blink sealing a vow I wasn't part of. I stumbled away, lungs on fire, vision tunneling. At the edge of the clearing, I risked one glance over my shoulder. Smoke swirled between us like a curtain, but I could still see the silhouette. Dog, grave, cross, all of it etched in flickering red. Some ridiculous part of me expected the dog to chase after, to realize survival required motion. But he didn't move, not a twitch. He simply breathed that graveyard air as if it were the last truth on earth. I crashed through underbrush toward the service road, slapping the emergency radio at my belt. "This is Ranger 37, I wheezed. "Spot fire moving fast. Coordinates—" I rattled them off, voice breaking. "Need a team. Repeat, need a team. And I've got a dog that won't abandon a grave." Static, then a calm dispatcher. "Copy 37. Cruiser en route. Evacuate immediately. Evacuate." The word echoed like an order from a judge. I pictured water drops, engines, men in yellow suits. Real help. Surely they could pry one dog from a patch of scorched earth. Surely. I leaned against a pine, forcing breath into my lungs, convincing myself that calling for help was victory, that everything tragic had just been averted. I thought maybe he finally gave up. If only I knew. I ran the whole way back, lungs clawing for air that tasted like ash and copper. Behind me, sirens wailed somewhere down the ridge, but the wind was faster than any engine. By the time I crashed into the clearing again, the sky was no longer blue. It was bruised black, veins of flame splitting the treetops like lightning frozen in place. The heat punched me in the face. Every breath felt like drinking from a furnace. I squinted through the smoke, heart hammering so loud I almost missed the worst sight of my life. The graveyard was on fire. Flames leapt from one dry tuft of grass to the next, licking the wooden crosses, turning memories into sparks. The grave the dog had guarded was half-burned already, charred edges curling inward as if the earth itself were clenching its fist. But the dog was gone. My knees buckled. I staggered closer, shielding my face from the heat. The ground around the grave was a mosaic of paw prints, frantic and deep, gouged into the dirt like someone had pressed hot irons there. They pointed one direction, straight into the heart of the flames roaring uphill. "No," I whispered, shaking my head hard enough to make the world blur. "You were supposed to stay. You were supposed to live." Another tree exploded, a sound like a cannon. Embers showered down, stinging my neck. I should have turned back. No dog could survive in that inferno. But my boots moved on their own, following those prints as if the path were carved into my bones. 10 steps in, the air thickened, a living wall of smoke that swallowed light. I dropped low, pulling my shirt over my mouth, crawling more than walking. The ground was hot enough to blister my palms through the glove leather. I found the first clue in a patch where the flames had jumped north, a scrap of old denim, singed at the edges. I recognized the fabric. It was the same faded blue tied around the cross, a relic of the man beneath. My stomach lurched. The dog had ripped it free. Why? A gust parted the smoke just long enough to show me the next stretch of paw prints, deeper, staggering, but determined. They led toward a collapsed log engulfed in fire. I could hear it crack, hollow and angry, as the bark peeled away in sheets. "Buddy!" I shouted, voice shredding. Nothing came back but the roar of burning pine. I crawled nearer, every instinct screaming that this was suicide. But I needed to know. My fingers closed around another clue half buried under ash. A small square of cloth, softer, lighter, an old shirt sleeve maybe. I pressed it to my nose. Beneath the smoke it smelled of sweat and cedar. Something human, something loved. That was when the truth hit me harder than the heat. He hadn't run to save himself. He ran into hell for something precious buried here, something that belonged to the man he'd already lost. A howl ripped through the smoke, high, ragged, echoing like glass underweight. My heart slammed so hard I tasted blood. He was alive out there, somewhere past the burning log. I surged forward, but a curtain of flame burst up, blocking the path. The heat forced me back, vision swimming. My skin felt ready to peel. Another howl, weaker now, fading deeper into the blaze. It sounded like goodbye. Panic flared. I snatched the radio from my belt. "Ranger 37, I'm inside the cemetery fire. I need a hose line or a drop, now." Static, then voices, but the words were swallowed in crackle. I looked up. The tops of the birches were crowns of fire, and embers were turning the air into a red snowstorm. I realized then that nature didn't care about promises or loyalty. It cared about fuel, and I was standing in the middle of it, hunting a miracle that might already be ashes. I stumbled back toward the grave, smoke pulling at my lungs like claws. A false calm settled over me. Maybe the dog had found what he wanted. Maybe he was gone, but his mission was done. My brain tried to make peace with that, but my heart refused, because I could still see those prints, leading away like a story half told, and I could still feel that scrap of cloth in my fist, warm with someone else's memory. I thought the fire might have swallowed the last chapter, but the dog, and whatever he carried, was writing something deeper, somewhere beyond the flames, and I knew I had to follow or forever wonder what love looks like when it walks through fire. I forced myself after the tracks, half blind, the world shrinking to a tunnel of flame and footfalls. Every breath tasted of rusted pennies, every exhale rattled like loose nails in my chest. The paw prints wavered ahead, filling with drifting ash, and for one dizzy moment, I imagined they were fading on purpose, like the dog was erasing his own trail, slipping into legend before my eyes. A branch crashed behind me, sparks exploding over my shoulders. I dropped, coughed hard enough to see black, then crawled under the smoke line. There, fresh prints, deeper than before, claws scoring the soil as if he'd been dragging something heavy. I staggered on, boots sinking into charred duff, mind repeating one delirious mantra, "Find him, find him, find him." The ground dipped. Through a sulfur haze, I caught a flicker of movement at the base of a scorched cedar. I froze, heartbeat stuttering. A shape in the gloom, low, lurching, hauling itself forward by sheer will. It was him, and he wasn't alone. Between his jaws hung a bundle the size of a loaf of bread, fabric wrapped tight, edges smoldered but unburned. He staggered 2 more steps, hind legs buckling. The cloth shifted, and from inside came the weakest squeak I have ever heard, softer than a sparrow's breath. My mind refused the image. A pup? Number couldn't be. But the tiny sound came again, a living question mark in the roaring sentence of the fire. "Easy, boy," I croaked, stumbling closer. "Easy. Let me help." He tried to lift his head, as if to say, "Stay back," but the weight of love, or grief, dragged him down. He placed the bundle on the earth with a tenderness that gutted me, then collapsed beside it. His paws were raw meat, pads split and weeping. Patches of singed fur curled away to reveal blistered skin. His chest hitched, more rattle than breath. I dropped to my knees. Flames crackled 10 yards off, licking upward, but held back for the moment by some trick of wind. I tore the shirt open, faded plaid, the kind you find in every rural closet, and there she was, a newborn pup, eyes still sealed, belly rising and falling like a moth's wing. Her fur was damp, slick with the dog's saliva, but untouched by the scorch. The realization struck like cold water. The dog hadn't been guarding a memory. He'd been guarding a secret, a life buried shallow near the grave. Maybe his master's final act, hiding the newborn in the only place he trusted, hoping loyalty would outlast death. I pressed my hand to the older dog's flank. His ribs quivered. He looked up at me, pupils blown wide, and in that smoldering gaze, I read a single plea. "Take it from here." My throat closed. "I've got her," I whispered, voice cracking. "I swear, I've got her." I scooped the pup inside the smoking cloth, cradled her against my chest. A tiny tongue probed the air, searching blindly for warmth. I felt something in me break and pour out all at once, a flood of awe, grief, and furious admiration. He was carrying his master's last hope, I muttered, half to the pup, half to whatever watched from the flames. The dog exhaled, a long, shuddering sigh. For a heartbeat, I thought he was gone. Then a tremor ran through his body, and he dragged one forepaw closer, as if reaching for the little bundle. I guided the pup against his nose. He touched her once, a feather-soft nudge, and settled back, eyes fluttering. A goodbye. A roar lifted overhead. The cedar's crown burst, sparks raining like molten hail. The heat slapped me sideways, adrenaline surging. I needed to move, now, or the story would end here in a circle of fire no one would ever find. I wrapped the pup tighter, shoved the cloth under my shirt. Then I slid both arms under the dog's torso. He was dead weight, muscles spent, but some ember of resolve still burned. When I lifted, he gave one final heave, helping me hoist him across my shoulders like a war-torn flag. "Hold on, soldier," I grunted, legs shaking. I turned downhill, following my own staggering footprints back toward what little daylight remained. Behind us, the flames surged, devouring the cedar, reaching for the sky with greedy hands. Smoke chased me, clawing at my lungs, but I kept moving, guided by the wail of distant sirens and the pulse of a heartbeat pressed against my chest, no bigger than a thumb. Branches slapped my face, ground tilted, colors dimmed at the edges of vision, yet I clung to one impossible truth. Love had dragged itself through hell, and I was not about to let it die on the last step. I burst from the tree line into the half-cleared road just as the first engine skidded in, lights strobing crimson through the murk. Firefighters shouted, rushing forward. Someone grabbed the dog, someone else the pup. Strong arms pulled me toward oxygen and safety. I sagged to my knees, coughing until stars swam. Through watering eyes, I saw them lay the dog on a tarp, masks already on him, hands working fast. The pup squeaked once, alive, fighting. Relief flooded me so hard it hurt. I thought this was the end, but it wasn't. Something bigger than all of us had just opened another chapter, and I realized the fire had saved a miracle, even as it tried to burn the world down. The firefighters dragged a charged hose line past me, yelling for space, but I couldn't let go. I cradled the pup inside my shirt, pressed against my sternum, and hooked one arm under the big dog's chest. His back legs dangled, limp, his breaths a ragged rattle that matched the siren pitch for pitch. "Cab of the engine, go," someone barked. Foam hissed across the road, but the wind hurled sparks over it like it was nothing. A wall of flame chewed closer, chewing fence posts to black splinters. I tightened my grip and ran. The dog's head bounced against my shoulder, muzzle streaking my collar with ash and saliva mud. Every step jarred his lungs, and each time I felt the hitch in his ribs grow shallower. The pup mewled, blind and frantic, her tiny claws kneading against my heartbeat. The engine door slammed open. I hoisted the dog in first. 2 firefighters hauled him across the bench seat. I climbed after, sealing the cab just as a roar like a freight train swallowed the world outside. "Hang on!" the driver shouted, throwing the rig in reverse. Tires spun, then caught. The windshield turned orange-white, too bright to be sky, too alive to be anything but fire. Inside the cab, the air tasted of rubber and sweat. I laid the dog's head in my lap, one hand cupped around the newborn. His tongue flicked once at my wrist, searching for water that wasn't there. "Stay with me, buddy," I whispered. He blinked, slow, intentional, and in those eyes, there was no fear, only peace, like he'd finished his mission. Pressure built behind my eyes. I blinked hard, but the tears came anyway, carving clean tracks down my soot-black cheeks. The engine lurched onto the service road, siren wailing for trees to get out of the way. Outside, the forest looked like the inside of a coal stove, trunks glowing, crowns exploding into red confetti. Somewhere in that chaos, thunder rumbled, a low, distant drumbeat. The pup stretched a paw, bumping the older dog's chin. He didn't respond. I slid the tiny bundle to his chest so she could feel the faint warmth still there. Her nose twitched, she rooted for a heartbeat, then curled into the hollow between his forelegs and fell asleep as if danger were a bedtime story. A shape smacked the windshield. Raindrop. Then another. The wipers squealed, smearing soot across the glass. "Rain?" the officer in the passenger seat muttered, half laughing, half crying. Of all times. The first cool draft seeped through the vent, washing the smoke taste off my tongue. It felt like grace, like someone upstairs hadn't forgotten the ledger. I stroked the dog's head, fingers sliding over scorched fur. "You hear that?" I whispered. "The sky's putting it out for you." His eyes found mine one last time, soft as twilight, steady as stone. He didn't fight, didn't shiver. He just breathed in, let it go, and never drew another. A sigh slipped from his ribs, light as a candle extinguishing, and everything inside me tilted. The siren kept screaming, the engine kept rattling, but the world turned silent. I pressed 2 fingers to the thin skin above his breastbone. Nothing, no rise, no tremor. I bowed my head until my forehead touched his. "You did it," I whispered, words breaking. "You didn't leave your master. You carried his love through fire." Rain hammered harder, drumming on the metal roof like applause from angels. Steam rose off the windshield where drops met radiant heat, fogging the cabin in milky swirls. The flames outside faltered, hissed, withdrew as if the storm itself was paying respect. The pup stirred against my chest, let out a squeak, then nestled deeper. Her heartbeat fluttered, tiny but furious, a tambourine inside a velvet bag. Life, insistent, life, refusing the void. The firefighter beside me laid a gentle hand on the older dog's flank, felt what I felt, and nodded once, solemn, grateful. "He held the line," she said. I swallowed, voice lost in the storm's roar. The truth was bigger than any eulogy. A promise buried under dirt had reached up, grabbed this dog by the soul, and marched him straight through hell to place a miracle in my arms. Outside, lightning split the sky, and for a strobe-bright instant I saw the ridge. Black trees, smoldering stumps, but also silver sheets of rain quilting the flames, turning fury into steam. I thought of the simple grave, half-burned yet stubborn, and pictured fresh grass growing there after the storm, watered by the same heaven that now cooled my skin. We hit the highway, leaving the fire line behind. The engine slowed, siren dropping to a weary moan. I pulled the pup free, wrapped her in a clean towel a medic shoved into my hands. She yawned, nose wrinkling, then fell asleep again, utterly trusting that the worst was over. I looked down at the still form in my lap. My chest hurt, but not from smoke anymore, from awe and grief and something deeper I didn't have language for. Thunder rolled, softer now, like a lullaby, and I realized nature hadn't taken anything from that dog. It had given him the stage to finish a story written in loyalty, sealed in smoke, and crowned in rain. Dawn bled pale gold over the blackened ridge by the time I made the slow walk back to the little cemetery. The rain had done its part. Steam still drifted from stumps like spirits exhaling, but the road was clear enough for the crew to drop me off with a shovel, a lantern, and the bundle cradled to my chest. The pup was quiet now, lost in exhausted dreams, her heartbeat a soft metronome against my ribs. The dog who saved her lay in my arms too, wrapped in the same plaid shirt he'd carried through the fire. His fur smelled of rain-cooled ash and something finer, like cedar smoke pressed into memory. The graveyard looked smaller in daylight, yet somehow more sacred. Charred grass ringed the margins, but the center, where his master rested, had survived. Half the cross was blackened, yes, but it still stood, stubborn as love itself. I knelt, set the bundle of cloth beside the cross, and began to dig. The earth was wet, heavy, fragrant with new promise. Every shovelful felt like a heartbeat returning to soil. I placed him in the ground on the right side of the cross, folding the singed shirt like a flag. For one trembling moment, I hesitated, palm on his shoulder, remembering the weight of his last breath against my thigh. "You kept your word," I whispered. "I'll keep mine." I covered him in layers of earth until only a smooth mound remained. Then I pressed my hand flat and let silence settle. A whine broke it, small, questioning. I turned. The pup had wriggled free of the towel, nose bumping dirt, legs splaying like a fawn's. I scooped her up, holding her so she could feel the warmth of the fresh grave beneath us. She whimpered again, softer, as though recognizing the scent of the one who had carried her through fire. My throat tightened until it hurt to swallow. "I came to see a grave." My voice cracked, But I kept going, and I'm leaving with a miracle born of fire and faith. High above, clouds parted, and a spear of sunlight struck the wet crossbar, painting it gold for a single breath. That was the crescendo, the moment my heart felt too wide for my ribs, the moment tears slid down my cheeks without heat or shame. If your heart just skipped a beat, you understand. Follow for more true stories nature writes with fire and tears. I settled back on my heels, pup tucked against my jacket, and let the forest's hush seep in. Steam swirled where sunlight kissed damp ash. Birds began testing their voices, thin but insistent. Life, again, always life, pushing through char and sorrow like green blades through concrete. I brushed soot from the rough wood of the cross, then reached into my pack for a tin tag. Using the edge of my knife, I scratched 2 words, "Faithful Guardian." I wired it beneath the master's name and stepped away. Wind rustled the surviving birches, and for a beat I felt 2 spirits standing watch, man and dog, bound by a loyalty the flames could not melt. If someone told me this story, I wouldn't believe it. But I saw it. I held him as he gave everything for love. The pup stirred, tiny paws kneading the air. She'd need milk, warmth, vet checks, a whole gauntlet of minor miracles. I tightened my arms and made the vow out loud. You'll have every chance he burned for. I started down the trail, boots squelching in wet ash. Behind me, the graves lay side by side, one old, one new, yet somehow whole. Ahead, the forest opened into a corridor of sunlight, where yesterday there had been smoke. Each step felt lighter, as if the dog's courage had seeped into my bones, turning grief into forward motion. Halfway to the service road I paused, looking back one last time. A breeze lifted the corner of the plaid shirt at the foot of the mound, then folded it flat again, like a final nod. I lifted my hand in silent salute. Some words hurt, some fists hurt, but loyalty burns hotter than any fire. If you believe animals love deeper than we can imagine, right, loyalty never dies.